Welcome to BookTok for BookTok, a literary podcast where we deep dive into the writings of your favorite novels. This summer, we are hosting our Romantasy Edition of a book club while we prepare for our 15-part literary analysis of Sarah J. Maas's A House of Sky and Breath.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy.
And each week we'll discuss one book from our summer book club roster. By using our literary backgrounds, we'll provide our first blush analysis of each book, as well as discuss listener thoughts.
This week, we'll be talking about Faebound by Saara El-Arifi.
I'm excited to talk about this one.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know how you would enjoy it. So for our listeners' awareness, I was like, I couldn't think of the word.
Listener Awareness Month.
I listened to the audiobook first and then Jack listened to it. And it took me a while to get through it. Jack, you had less time at your disposal to get through it. So I'm interested to hear what your first reaction was.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is actually probably the closest we've recorded something after me finish reading something, because I finished yesterday.
Oh, okay.
And I did get through it pretty quickly. I really enjoyed it. And then there were some hangups I had towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been really stuck on trying to figure out what are my hangups.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk to you about it, because how much of it is it preference? How much is it structure, writing structure that I'm just doesn't jive with me, which falls under preference? And how much of it are actual things that are worthy of discussion and not critique, but just saying, oh, here's why this might have felt out of place for someone. One of the things I was very excited about with Faebound is how it took fae and elves, something that we are very used to in a very Western Anglo version. And the author took it and said, okay, I'm going to run with this, and we're going to, because she adapts a lot of some African folklore in this too, right? I don't know what part of Africa. Very sorry about that one, but I do know that, like, I thought that was a really unique take.
Yeah. I agree. And so I believe that this is the author's third book that she's written based on my light research, and she is of Ghanaian and Sudanese heritage. So I feel like I don't know I'm not very well versed in African folklore, but I feel like I can see that influence, because it is very out of the norm from a Western perspective, right?
Oh yeah.
I thought there were elements of the world building and the fantasy and the magic system that were mind-blowing for me. I thought they were really, really... I don't know if it's original, honestly, because I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, it's when Poppy Wars happened and everyone was like, this is so original. And you were just like, oh yeah, this is like super common in China, like very, very popular. So it's like, is it original? I mean, which it's all original, or is it like, are we just ignorant of African folklore?
Right. But I do love this marrying of our understanding of elves and fae,
yes,
with whatever background the author is bringing to the table. And I believe her first name is pronounced Sarah, but it could be Sarah. But I'm going to go with Sarah.
We did Google that. I remember we have Googled that, and Google said Sarah. So we did. We tried. I'm just saying, we tried. We tried getting her name correctly.
I was going to say, I don't even trust my memory at this point, but please continue.
Where I was going with it was, when I think books that are, or just like books or stories or anything, when you say elves or fairy, especially elves, I think Orlando Bloom, Lord of the Rings. You know, like very fair, very white, very distinctly male and female.
Yeah.
And it really took this concept that we, me and probably a lot of other people, just have such an idea of what it looks like and what I mean, it's the same thing. Like, I went in with a Western, white, Anglo, straight, hetero point of view, knowing that's not what I was going to get. But
Mhm.
it's just kind of like, I didn't realize how much my brain goes that way until I had a book that was like, no, we're going to do it this way, which I
Mhm.
love, I appreciate. And I think that she goes about that in a really strong way. When I say strong, I mean like writing strength way. Like her writing and her saying like this is what everyone looks like was very clear and very strong.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I liked about the narrative style is that it was unapologetic about how it was going to handle things,
Mhm.
nor did it feel the need to over explain.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, especially when you deal with non binary or
Mhm.
fluid gender, if you deal with, any race ethnicity that involves a skin tone with a lot of melanin that is not fair,
Mhm.
there's a tendency to over
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah.
And I think that Sarah found a really great balance where that was unnecessary
Mhm.
and it was just like, okay, this is the world we're in. Learn to accept it. Okay, great. Let's go.
It didn't feel catered to a white audience of like, when you think fae and elves and fairies and everything, it might default to white. It didn't feel like it was catering to that, but it did feel like a very distinct no. These are what my characters look like.
Mhm.
This is how my world is, especially the LGBTQ
Mhm.
angle. Like I'm
Mhm.
really excited for us to talk about that because this is in our book series, this is the first one that it is very LGBTQ forward of a book.
Yeah. Yeah, which I feel like has been really lacking in the romantasy genre.
Yeah, in a lot of genres, but
A
especially
lot of genres.
romantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am very excited to talk about that. I think that like you, I had hangups
Mhm.
and I'll be interested to discuss those with you because again, they might be preference. And I have a feeling some of my hangups will not be your hangups and vice versa.
Why am I so determined for us to have the same hangups? I'm like,
Because you
"No,
you're so
we need to
determined for us to lift the same weights as
I don't know
well.
why at the gym when we go together, I'm so like, "All right, we're gonna have to lift the same weight here, Amy." I don't know. It's just you push me in the sense of like, which you don't. I'm like, "Okay, Amy did this much. I have to do this much. I don't wanna let her down, coach. I don't wanna let you down." So,
So let's see how that translates here to this book, Faebound.
I don't wanna let you down, coach. Let's start with LGBTQ
Okay.
because I think that that is probably one of the dominant traits here of the
Mhm.
book.
Mhm.
We're going to read a couple of listener comments. And the first one is I actually really liked the gender fluidity of the characters. I think it was executed really well.
I agree with that. I feel like never was there a point where Sarah was like, these are their pronouns. Let me call
Yeah.
them out for you before
Yeah.
we talk about this character. Instead, it was their pronouns were just there and you just went on with
Mhm.
your day. And I feel like the visual representation as well as the narrative representation really aligned with my experience of
Mhm.
interacting with people who are gender fluid or non binary. And I really appreciated it because it wasn't difficult.
Yeah.
And Sarah does not write this to preach to us, I don't think, but it was a really big it was a lesson for me
Oh
that
yeah.
the way we talk about gender, the way we write about gender does not have to be instructional. It does not have to be preachy.
It doesn't have to come with explanation.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And I thought she did that really, really well.
Yeah, I there were so many times, not so many, but there were a few times where we would have been fair amount into dialogue, fair amount into introduction with the character, and then I'm like, "Oh, wait, we've been using they them for a while."
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's not like you said, it's not with, like, some kind of preamble, like, it just is,
Yeah.
and whenever people love to bitch and moan about, pronouns and stuff. It's like, this is such a good book to be like, look, do you notice how the book did not lack anything? If you
Mhm.
had changed those moments to he, him, or she, her, it would not have changed a single thing about that. It just like, you can respect a character and a human and
Yeah.
their pronouns, and it was so seamless with
Mhm.
the story. And like you said, like, what was she preaching to us? It didn't feel like it, but like maybe she was. But
Yeah.
also, like, if she was, then she did it the way that I hope she was trying to do it, in the sense that it worked. in the in the way that I was like, yeah, no, this is awesome.
Yeah, I think the lesson that I learned from this is that internally, with the narrative perspectives that we're dealing with,
Mhm.
the default assumption for pronouns was always they, them
Yeah, yeah.
until there was clarity, right?
Yes.
And I think that was a lesson for me that, and I find this to be true in business writing too. The assumption is always they, them until until you know for sure.
Mm.
And you don't have to make a big deal about it. And there doesn't have to be dialogue around it. Just that's the safe avenue. And now we're having this dialogue mostly because this is something I find really fascinating from a writing perspective, because it's
Mhm.
so opposite of what my real life experiences. You know, in work, people have pronouns in their signature
Yeah.
lines. If they have a preference, sometimes they talk about it.
Mhm.
And that's not everybody's experience in real life. But I find it important to have this conversation because I'm just fascinated with how well she did it.
Yeah, it blows me away because as also a writer, I want to really do a good job of representation in my
Mhm.
books. And I mean, I'm just sitting here trying to take notes from her
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
so masterfully done,
Mhm.
and it was so seamless, and it was God, and I don't know if I'm saying it right. Like, it didn't take anything away from characters or add to the
Right.
characters. Like, the characters were so distinct, and it's just the same way that, like, being a man or a woman shouldn't add or take away from you. Like, it just it just what it is what you are. You know what I mean? So, or
Yeah.
identifying as male or female, like pronouns. You know what I mean? Like that. Sorry, I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but I hope people understand what I was saying.
I understood what you were saying. And I do also have to recognize that we are both cisgender women.
Yeah.
And so our perspective on how well this is done is also limited, right?
Yep.
We might not have the same sensitivities that others who are gender fluid
Hmm.
would experience this novel. So from my perspective, I thought it was well done. Someone who is gender fluid may or may not agree, and I
I
recognize
would love
that.
to hear someone's like point of view of it, like someone who is gender fluid. I would love to hear what their thoughts are
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
this.
Another listener comment that we received was, "We needed queer and diverse fae/elves, and I enjoy this take on it." And I agree with this too. You know, when we think of fae and elves, I think most people's default, or at least first exposure in the Western world, is probably Lord of the Rings.
Mhm. That
When you
was
think,
mine for sure.
yeah, and I think that would be the case for me as well, unless you count like Thumbelina or something for
I
fairies,
mean, I take it back. I 100%
Fantasia.
count Thumbelina. Yes.
But for elves, for sure,
Yeah.
I would think of Lord of the Rings. And it was fun to see both
Mhm.
in the same world and see the differences, which I think were grounded in our understanding of the two different races. However, at the same time, I love that the first chapter opens with an LGBTQ couple.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially, I guess I would call it lesbian couple. I'm trying to remember what the chieftain's gender was.
Well, I think she identified
I think she identified as female
female.
or
Yeah.
woman identifying, but I cannot recall off the top of my head because it was a little long. It was a little longer ago for me
Yeah.
having read this. So I loved that representation as someone who is bisexual, lesbian leaning. And I loved that we had a main character who was lesbian. I love seeing sapphic representation in writing.
Mhm.
And again, just like the gender fluidity, it was there from the get-go, and you roll with it or
Yeah.
you stop reading. But it's like, this is the reality. Let's let's just keep going.
I really enjoyed the LGBTQ aspect of it. I am, as I've said many times on this podcast, unfortunately am straight. And it was I could be doing a better job of reading more sapphic novels. That's on
Mhm.
me. And it was a really great book to read. I think I mentioned it to you while I was reading this, Amy, where I said something like it was an experience that I can appreciate a lot of LGBTQ members must experience when they're living their life reading mainstream books, watching mainstream media and movies and shows, where it's like, oh, I'm enjoying the story, but that's not me. Like, that's not
Yeah.
how I live. And it was, I don't want to say it felt good, but it kind of felt good of like, I just really appreciated being on that side of saying, like, I really did love this couple. Did it resonate with me on like the, I was about to say bone deep level. Like, I don't know. Like it did. I love a love story, but like it just, I didn't connect with it in that way. And it just kind of gave me an appreciation of like, okay, yes, this is what I'm sure most LGBTQ people must feel when they are, and I don't want to say that I was underrepresented, so that's not with me coming from it, but that's what LGBTQ must feel like when they're reading something and just so underrepresented, and when they're just like they might like it but they don't connect to it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I just really enjoyed being able to read something and say like, okay, well obviously like I'm not connecting to the sense of like I would also, I don't know, I really was rooting for their sex scenes. I'm not gonna lie. So like I I was like more of those, but should I take that out?
No,
No.
I mean, we would say that about a
Yeah.
heterosexual, uh,
Yeah.
and there's heterosex in this too. The smut was definitely saved for the end of the novel.
I think that smut deserves a
Yeah,
different point of
and
view.
we'll talk about that
Yeah.
later.
I know I'm not saying this correctly. I think I just really enjoyed what like I enjoyed reading this a
Mhm.
lot, and in my enjoyment, I did appreciate how there like I appreciate the feeling that a lot of people from the LGBT community must feel like, and it just made me say like, yes, we need far more representation. Far more of these books.
Yeah, I how do I want to respond to that? I spent a lot of time reading fan fiction
Mhm.
growing up about gay men manga.
Yeah.
And obviously I am not male. I don't have the appendages for it. However, it really resonated with me. And I think that was because I had a lot of exposure to it. I think that it is very difficult unless you're looking in like the wee recesses of the internet.
Mhm.
Sometimes hard to find LGBTQ representation and to find stories that you don't have the same identity but that you resonate with.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's a quantity issue more than
Mhm.
anything,
Mhm.
right? I
And publishers not taking the risk on things
right,
on books with representation.
right. I agree. Now I am, as I've already said, lesbian. Um and even I would say I didn't really connect with these characters, even the lesbian ones, but I appreciated having representation. So I feel kind of in the same boat, and it's not because of
Yeah.
our sexuality. I think it's just because of the way it was written.
I okay, so I guess where I kind of want to like clarify where I stand. I think that where I didn't connect is the sense of like I loved it, but it was like it's the same way that I when I was like reading when I hear like Lettles, sorry. When I would hear
Little.
Lettle's story and with Ryan, oh my god, I was eating that up. Like I was like, "Oh my goodness." With Yurin and her first lover, the I
Mhm.
can't remember her name. I did like that too quite a bit. I agree that her love story with Fury towards the end, I think that's something to discuss. I think where I felt those moments, I think it was just more of a matter of like, um I don't know, like just coming from a place of, it's just coming from a place of being like, I'm a straight woman. This is this, and I'm reading something that I would normally, was not raised reading because it wasn't part of our mainstream media, and
Mhm.
I was reading it saying like I just wish it was. It's interesting that you mentioned bringing up fan fiction where there's like with male couples and stuff. I This is not for us to get into. This is me not even knowing what the conversation is around this. But I know there's a conversation in the literary world about women writing male gay characters.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're not going to have that here today. I just know
No.
people are having it.
Yeah, and yeah, we're not going to talk about it because I'm not informed enough about the
And
discussions that are
no,
had.
yeah, neither am I. I just know people did it.
Yeah, and
People had those talks.
and I will recognize there have been a lot of women writing about gay men in fan fiction,
Hmm.
a lot of female um mangaka or manga authors
Yeah.
who write and draw gay manga. So it is definitely a
Yeah.
subculture.
Because I've read a lot of men together. Like I've read with fan fiction and with my God bless pucking around. Like I've read then I went on my own journey there. I've read a lot of and consumed a lot of media with two men. I think this was just me being like, wow, I've really not consumed anything where it is two women.
Yeah, and I think that's a societal thing. For
Hmm.
some reason, and this is me making lots of assumptions and general statements, and I could be way off. However, my perception is that homosexual men,
Hmm.
and this hierarchy, mind you, exists within the LGBTQ world as well.
Hmm.
Um, Homosexual men dominate. They're the most accepted over lesbians, over
Hmm.
bisexual, over trans.
Hmm.
And there is this hierarchy. I mean, I had a homosexual coworker who was a good friend of mine, but he used to tell me all the time,
Yeah.
you just need to make up your mind. It's not that hard to choose as a bisexual woman. He's like,
Yeah.
It's men or it's women, just choose one." So there's marginalization in the LGBTQ
Oh
community as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And I think we see some of that in the type of media that we consume.
I mean, think about the way that there's like how many gay bars are in the country and how many lesbian bars are in the country.
Yep.
It is shocking how little. Like there's like a handful in America. It
Yeah.
is uh,
Of lesbian bars.
lesbian bars. Yeah, lesbian bars. No, I mean, like I think it's fair to say that. I mean, one, we do know that there's always going to be marginalization, unfortunately, and we can see that with even within the community. And it was definitely me kind of taking this in of like, oh, I have for sure not read anything with two women.
Mm.
And I would love to consume more of it. Like I want more representation. I want more female leads. Like, I'm not, just because I can't relate to it on that level of like being with another woman, I can still enjoy it the same way that I can't relate to being a gay man. Like,
Right, 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 right.
I can still, I love love. I love a love story.
Mhm.
And it was definitely one, but I feel like to the author, Sahara,
So Sarah.
Sarah, to Sarah's a credit, but like I also want to know, like I'm just more curious of like why, curious of what this like following thing I'm about to say, how she has one sister in a relationship with a woman and the other sister in a relationship with a man. Is it like for more mass media consumption? Like where you like adding that straight relationship in there so that
Mhm.
you know you get the straights. I mean, I don't want to say that's why she did it. I'm just, I hope that's not something that any publisher made her feel like she had to do.
Yeah, that's fair. I
That's
mean,
all. Yeah.
if we look at some of the relationships that we see two women together, two men together, and a
Hmm.
man and a woman. I mean, actually, one is gender fluid and the other is a man. If you think about the cousin
Oh,
and
right.
wow, I'm blanking on
The
names right now.
cousin and I can't remember names, and the hair, the dresser, the stylist.
Yeah, the stylist.
Well, I mean, if you really look at it, there are no, they are the only hetero couple pairing there, because even with Fury's
Sorry.
ex-lover
Are
and
hetero? You mean Lettle?
Lettle and Ryan,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone else is couple. Like there's a bunch of different couplings, but like again, I love the diversity. I love
Mm-hmm.
mixing it up,
Mm-hmm.
and God, I ate it up. I ate up Lettle's and Ryan's love story. I love angst.
Really? So I guess let's talk about Little and Ryan,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, because I found them extremely annoying, and I love reading. I mean, I enjoy heterosexual romance stories as well.
Mm-hmm.
I had such a hard time having empathy for Little. I
Mm-hmm.
found her extremely frustrating.
Mm.
And so I did not care about the relationship between Little and Ryan.
Interesting. It's, I will say, so we both listened to this book. The narrator, I think, kind of did Little dirty.
Yeah, that's fair. And one of our listeners said that as well, I think, in
The comments.
the comments. Let me just pull it up really fast. Oh, yes. Little's voice in the audiobook, LOL. Oh, as in, this is something I did not like.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, Little's voice in the audiobook was not enjoyable.
It, that being said, I know you're capable of separating the two, of
Mhm.
like annoying voice versus annoying character. I think I appreciated the balance of Lettle to Urine, because Lettle is kind of chaotic. She
Mhm.
is so headstrong. She is so charged through, I'm not going to slow down for anyone and I'm going to continue my life. I think I liked her because of how I understood her better than Urine.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think, like, for me, her faults, her flaws, and where they come from and what they are were a lot clearer for me, versus, and I say this still really liking Urine, but there was a point towards the end of the story where I understood what was driving Lettle. Like, I got it.
Mhm. Mhm.
At the end of the story, I couldn't figure out what was driving Urine as much. Like, I know we were being told,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
didn't feel that way, versus Lettle, I thought was like distinctly wrong many times. Like, she was going on her own journey, but like I never doubted what her choice was.
I think you make a great point. As much as I dislike Lettle
Hmm.
personally,
Yeah.
she is a very consistent character. Her
Yes.
characterization is very clear, and there are no ifs, ands, or buts about what
Hmm.
her intentions are and what her desires are. Urine, I agree. I did identify with her in the beginning of the novel, and I felt like as the novel continued, she was less on a path that was determined by her desires and
Hmm.
motivations and more on the path of, and this is me speculating, but it felt like it was more on the path of where the author wanted her to
I
go.
100% agree. I can't throw anything at you, but I agree. I the Urine at the beginning, total solid, made sense character.
Yeah.
Urine at the end, it felt like, she, the author, knew where she wanted the book to end,
Yeah.
how book 2 is supposed to lead up.
Mhm.
I don't think that Urine made those choices.
I agree. And I think that that influences the story overall.
Mhm.
And I think that we have some really mixed reactions to the story overall
Yeah.
from our listeners. So it might be worth reading some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so here's one of our listener thoughts. And again, like, this is harsh, I understand, but we asked our listeners things they like and didn't like. So here's one of those dislike moments. Slow to get into, slow parts throughout, sometimes felt like nothing was happening at all.
I am going to say I feel very aligned with this comment.
Mhm.
I felt like the story was extremely repetitive up until the last 10%.
Mm.
at the last 10-15%, I was like, oh, I actually want to listen now. Whereas before, I would listen and then I would stop for long periods of time. And I think if I spent more time analyzing it,
Mhm,
I could see all the threads that were being woven together.
mhm,
I could see how things were building up, but nothing compelled me to read.
mm. Nothing was at stake.
Yeah.
I know what was at stake was meant to be their escape, but it just felt like great things were happening to them. Why would you want to leave?
Right.
Like
Right.
it was, the beginning. I was really enthralled with the beginning. Like the world was so distinct, the characters
Mhm.
were so vibrant, and then they get not kidnapped but like arrested. They get taken to this other world, and then now they're there, and then Urine gets Faebound, and that's exciting too because like of course someone's gonna get Faebound, and then I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my god, it's her. And then okay, cool, now we're dealing with the repercussions there. From there to what you're saying, like the last 10%, I couldn't tell you what happened now that I'm thinking about it, and I just finished this. I know there's some back and forth, and I think part of the issue with it is Urine's love story with Fury, because I
Yeah.
didn't fully buy it.
I agree. I didn't either. And honestly, I didn't buy any of the love stories. And part of it is because I think the signaling was too strong, too early for all of them. So I'm talking about Little and Ryan.
Mhm,
There was that instant attraction despite the bickering, but
mhm.
it was just so heavy-handed, and I felt the same about Urine and Fury, and there was no real grounding moment to justify why a relationship would happen.
Yeah, Lettel and Ryan, I get it in the sense that, like, they're kind of been lust at first sight mixed in with, like, we're being thrown together to go hunt my sister, and suddenly I'm little. Like they're on a mission, they're being forced proximity. Like
Right.
these are things I understand. And even with Urine and Fury, this is a trope that we are, as a reader, in theory very familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Her, like, like, I'm a captor and now you're here to train me. All the things were there.
Yeah.
All the things were set up. But I remember when Fury was first introduced, Urine was immediately attracted to her, and I was
Mm,
like, you just made me believe that she was in love with someone else.
yeah.
That, like, there was even talk about how um yeah, I can't remember her the first lover, but the captain, or not the captain, the chieftain,
Chieftain.
how she had other lovers, but Urine was there and, was kind of like always waiting and stuff. So it's like you really sold me and painted me on a very loyal
Mhm.
Urine, the one who everything about her character screams loyalty, right? It's
Right.
very, I am in love with I am in love with this chieftain. I would die for her. I was
Mhm.
willing to.
Yeah.
She was so loyal to her family. Like she is a soldier. Her instant like I love oh, I'm so like I'm in lust with her.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I felt betrayed. Where I was like, how dare you? I thought you just said you were in love.
Yeah, it reminds me of the first time Feyre sees Reese, and she's like, "He's the most beautiful man I've ever seen." I'm like,
Yeah.
"You're not supposed to. No, no,
Yeah,
not
but at least
okay."
like Farah was no longer into him like throughout the rest of the book.
Right? No, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
completely agree with
yeah.
you. I think the relationship with Fury really clouded Urine's characterization
Yeah.
and made Urine less of a believable character for me, which made me not invested in the
Yes.
relationship with Fury.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel like I saw Fury change to
Mm.
justify why the two of them suddenly were making out.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, other than like, okay, Urine's been horny for her since the
Mhm.
get-go.
Mhm.
Sure. I did not feel the shift at all from Fury. It went from I hate you to
Let's have sex.
yeah. I'm curious of how it would have been like if the build-up to their romantic climax was just a kiss and
Mhm.
nothing
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
Because it the stakes of her wanting to leave and go home, I
Her
didn't believe
being
her being urine, sorry, thank you, of wanting to leave and go home became less and less believable the
yeah,
more she was falling for Fury.
yeah,
Because then it was like, no, I want more grappling. I want you to really struggle with this idea of like, I want to go back home to my chieftain girlfriend. I want to
yeah,
go back home to her and save this world. And I need it to be, I don't know, like, I think when like the option of leaving is easy
yeah,
and you're struggling, that makes it that much more compelling.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. I think after Urine becomes Faebound,
Uh-huh.
there just wasn't enough movement. I
Yeah.
think they were so stagnant staying in the Fae stronghold.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I understand why,
Yeah.
but it's like they sat and smoked a joint for like the next 60% of the book. Like there was
Yeah.
nothing to do.
I mean, nothing was at stake. Like,
Yeah.
I wonder how it would have been like if the murders were brought up sooner, if other people
Mhm.
were murdered, have a
Yeah.
mystery. There was like no plot at that point to like
Yeah.
get them through, cuz at that point you're just kind of waiting until this other thing happens.
Right, right. There's the training sequence, but the training sequence is not enough to keep
Yeah.
us engaged. And I agree. I like it would have been great for there to have been murders and it become a
Yeah.
whodunit. And Urine is helping Fury find the murderer. And
Mhm.
then it becomes more compelling, right? Because
Yeah.
they're helping each other, but they don't like each other. And it honestly would have ended up being like Earth and Blood. But I would have enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
I mean, you're going from enemies to lovers, and that like, and this is an enemies to lovers that
Yeah.
I love. Like in the sense, like I this is this like you're starting off with you killed her brother. I couldn't ask for a better enemies. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
I
I
couldn't have wanted more.
yeah, I really, really wanted to like it or
Yeah,
like their relationship.
no, me too. Yeah,
And yeah, it just there was something missing.
there is something I know, like, and that's where the ending for me. I just kind of like all the other little ooh moments, right? The like I was expecting Ryan to be human with the whole like
Oh.
he smelled different and they kept talking
Mm.
about like you need all three and I was like, well, Ryan seems important. So, like him having a I can't remember. I just finished reading this too. The special animal thingy. Someone wrote it in the comments.
Obia.
Obia, thank you. Like he had an obia and like the obia was
Mhm.
what was
Mhm.
falling Lettle around. I think Sarah did a really good job of just kind of like of the misdirects, at least for me. Like I was
Mhm.
like, 'cause I
Mhm.
was like, oh, Lettle's gonna get an obia too, and then ended up being Ryan's obia who's looking after her. Like there was enough misdirect there where I enjoyed it. I figured out that the um
Comey.
prisoner Comey, yeah, I figured that out like not early, but the second they gave the first clue
Oh,
of
yeah.
how early did you figure it out?
Oh, instantly. As soon as he was introduced, I was like, "Oh, that's the old king."
Okay, well, not all of us can figure it out that quickly, but it's like really that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think something I would like to see in whatever book comes follows up after Feybound. I'm assuming there's going to be a second book based on the ending. I think Sarah can fine tune some of her foreshadowing
Mhm.
and clues because I felt like a lot of the twists and turns were very predictable for me. Like
Okay.
I the only thing I didn't foresee was Ryan
Yeah.
being Feybound as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything else, I kind of was like, yep, that's what I thought was going to happen.
Mm. And I think that comes back to I don't know how it comes back to it, but while you're talking, the connection was made. So I'm going to see if I can get to that. I think
Okay.
it comes back to like what's at stake.
Yeah.
That because you're it's the distraction thing, right? If
Hmm.
something over here is at stake and you're so busy looking over here, you won't be able to see those little subtle clues.
Right.
But if what you're getting is a bunch of conversation and you're getting like, here are those clues, they become less
Yeah.
subtle.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the beginning, the first part was so solid because so much was at stake there.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. It went from a lot of movement to I'm still like not mad, but I'm still like going back to it because it's still I'm processing why did this just not the ending just didn't hit because I was so excited at the beginning with it.
Yeah, and let's talk about why the beginning was exciting. The
Mhm.
idea of Drumfire and
Yeah.
how the elves use magic,
Mhm.
and it's through the obia, but not, through the skin of the obia, the entrails of the obia.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I thought it was so cool to create magical objects and to use drums to
Mhm.
generate magic to as a weapon. So unique compared to anything else I've ever read.
Yeah. I mean,
That
even her like urine like being exiled and
Oh,
all this
yeah.
other stuff. Like it was like high stakes.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for me, it was the world building at the
Oh
start. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not just the high stakes; it's
Mm,
also the world building that accompanied it.
fair.
And I did feel like she did a great job with the world building. I don't know that all of our readers or all of our listeners loved the world building. Some
Uh-huh.
did, some didn't. But I thought it was fascinating, and I thought it intermingled really well with the high stakes plot journey we were going on
Mhm.
until everybody was reunited.
Yeah, I'm going to go on this world building journey with you. I agree that the first half when we're in the Elfland, right? The
Mhm.
world building is so unique. Then we get into the Feylands and it really seemed almost like more not modern, but like they talk about universities. They talk about like there's a library. There's like
Mm.
it almost seems like in order to show that this paradise is so amazing, they kind of had to like it had to be a little bit more quote unquote modernized
Mm,
in a
mm,
way, but now you're taking away some of this interesting world and
mhm.
you're making it in a way that it's almost too relatable to me.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I wish I had gotten to see more of the war between the different elven
Mhm.
groups. I wanted to see more of that society,
Yeah.
um, because it felt more unique than the Fae society.
Yeah. And everything going on with the elf war was very interesting, especially when I think about Lettle's commentary on it. I
Mhm,
loved her commentary on the war. It's just so I feel like it's a very universal experience of like,
mhm.
okay, great. These two parties are fighting, these two countries, governments, kingdoms, whatever you want to call it, are fighting. And what does that do for the people
Yeah,
other than die, other
yeah,
than make it harder? Like,
right.
I mean, I loved her going from one kingdom to Crescent, like going from Waning to Crescent, and how she was like, no, we can just go through. Like, who are we? We're people. This
Yeah,
isn't about us.
yeah,
And I would like to shift the conversation a little bit
sure.
to things that I did like.
Okay.
Uh Urine and everyone pointing out how her chieftain lover
Mhm.
was not who she thought she was.
I agree. I loved how dedicated and how much faith Urine had in her chieftain and the campaign
Yeah,
she was elected on, basically, and how everyone was like,
girl,
yeah,
no.
but look at her actions.
Yeah.
That she obviously does not care about the people the way she says she cares about the people.
Yep.
I thought that was a great, interesting journey, and I would love to see that continued in a follow up book.
Yeah, me too. It was because you can tell she was really grappling with it.
Yeah,
And that comes down to the ending where I didn't feel like we landed on a conclusion. It didn't
right.
feel like you know what? I'm going to choose my own narrative. Screw you all. Because I feel like that would have been fun for, as a writer and as a reader, to see her choose the chieftain over Fury.
Hmm.
Because it didn't feel like she chose anything
Yeah, yeah,
at
I
the end.
agree. And that I think goes back to what we were talking about with Urin's characterization, right?
Mm.
Because that is muddy. Because part of her motivation is her belief that her chieftain will essentially bring peace, and that all the starving children will be able
Mhm.
to have a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
And she's dedicated to those people who she was once like, who, begged,
Mhm.
borrowed, and stole. But I didn't feel that conviction after the interchange, the exchange of fluids between
After
her and
the
Fury.
exchange of fluids?
My brain is so fried. I
I think it's called
apologize.
sex, Amy. I think that's what that's called.
Is it?
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't know where I'm going anymore. Sorry. I
No, no,
lost
no.
my train of
I
thought.
I see what you're saying, and, like, things change once they had sex,
Yeah.
and I don't think that the
That wasn't explored
narration.
enough.
Yeah, and I don't think the narration went, like, actually showed that change either.
Yeah, that's fair. I think and maybe this is a personal preference thing.
Yeah.
I don't think the narrative style worked for me because we're talking about this world building and how
Mhm.
much we found the elven world very, very interesting. But I had no desire by the end of the book to read another book about the elven world because I felt so burned by the narrative style
Oh, interesting.
while we were in the Fae part of the world.
Can you talk about the narrative style, the things that maybe you didn't care about as much?
I think I think there was some, and this is not meant to be a critique in the this is not mean-spirited.
Mhm.
This is just a fact of, I believe Sarah might be a more junior author.
Yeah.
The narrative style was not complex. I remember listening to parts of the book where it was urine, blah blah blah. Urine said blah blah blah. Ryan said blah blah blah. Little said
Mhm.
blah blah blah.
Mhm.
Comey said, and I just kept counting the lines, and I was like, there were a dozen lines of dialogue, and it all ended with the same dialogue tag,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't. I it was either dialogue or it was exposit
I know exposition. I know exactly what you're talking about, though.
and I think that obviously can be developed over time.
Mhm.
I would hope that Sarah develops that as she continues to write, but I just wasn't compelled by the writing, the prose.
I it was a word that kept popping up in my head throughout listening, and it was simple. And again, to
Mhm.
me, that wasn't a negative thing. I think that there is a lot of strength in simplicity of writing. And there were moments where I think she nailed it. And I think that she did a really good job with the simplicity of it. I think some of the world building really helps when there's like that, like it just like this is what it is, right? Like I think
Mhm.
those moments are really good, and I can see what she was going for in the times where it felt like a miss, where it was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you're doing the thing that you were doing here, and it really landed here, but over here it doesn't feel as much." And I
Yeah.
agree. And whether that's like I think those are great moments for when like high emotions, where like those
Mhm.
simple moments when there's just a lot happening. I think stylistically, this is easily just a preference thing. This doesn't
Yeah.
mean that this is like the correct answer, but preference. I do like seeing it when the simple description and simplicity of writing happens with much more grand emotions or grand
Mhm.
settings.
Mhm.
And sometimes it felt like the simplicity was happening at too simple of a scene.
Yeah, and I think that's what I found too. It was when, all the elves come together to digest information,
Mhm.
and it's during just the dinner time conversations
Yeah.
that I'm like, there's not enough happening
Yeah.
for this, for the momentum to be slowed down in this way.
Yeah. And that's absolutely could just be a style choice that you and I don't jive with. I
Yeah.
There were times where I felt like it was really good for the writing. I thought it lifted it up. But then those moments that you're talking about, I struggled. I got stuck on those moments too.
Yeah, I think for me what it comes down to is it felt like there were strong bookends for the most part. Like
Yeah.
she had Saara had a very clear vision for the beginning,
Yeah.
a very clear vision for the end, and the middle was less clear. It was a
Mhm.
little murky, and it felt like the narrative and the characters were really struggling to get through from point A to point B.
Yeah. Yeah, because even the things that were at stake, them trying to get out,
Mhm.
even Lettles and Ryan's relationship, like things were just kind of given up
Yeah.
pretty quickly. Ryan feels rejected. Is he trying to get her back?
Yeah. Right.
Or is Lettle trying to, is she going to throw more like, I say this in a good way, temper tantrums, like, give me the angst, like, is she going
Yeah.
to do something? Or where's the breakout attempt? That's another thing. They kept being
Yeah.
told they can't get out and they
And they
accepted
never
it.
tried.
And they
Yeah.
never tried.
Agreed.
And it was a whole lot of like, what about this route? Nope,
Mhm.
can't
Yeah.
do it. And it's like, but you guys didn't even poke at it. You didn't even
Yeah.
try.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with you. And I think one, if I could rewrite this book myself, I
Yeah.
think the thing I would change is either let's have some breakout attempts, let's have some action, or let's have some of the reveals because all the reveals were crowded at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
Could we have some reveals peppered in? Like, could we have found out who Comey was earlier? I don't think that
Yeah.
would have hurt, right?
I
Could we have
agree.
found out that
The elves were helping, or the fae were helping the elves. I think that
exactly
could have happened earlier, and that would
right?
have been great to see Urine struggle with that.
Right, because I felt like that would have given her more reason to want to go back to the chieftain
Mhm.
because that's important information that yeah, is being used against them. So, I felt like there was an imbalance and I felt like some of the things that were hinted at for so long
Yeah.
could have been shifted around.
Yeah.
And that would have made the story continue to move forward for me.
Absolutely. It was, even the action moments towards the end, like Ryan killing Comey, I was like so confused if it happened or not.
Mm, mm,
It just kind of like sped through it. And we talked about this prophecy. He talked about what he did to his mom. We spent time with it. We've hinted at it. And this like grand moment. And it's like, I get what you're saying, as in Ryan, as if I'm talking to him. It's like, I get what you're doing. You're killing the person that like you said you'd kill, and you're not going to waste time with it. So like, yeah, there's efficiency in that. I get it.
yeah. Yeah.
Uh how else can you draw, like, how do we make more to it, because that was like what you're finally getting to a high stakes moment, and it happened so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would have liked to have seen Ryan struggle with that of like, oh,
Yeah.
here's this person who I've actually
Grown to care
grown to
about.
like.
Yeah.
Right. Do I actually really want to kill him?
Yeah, because I also was really confused on where Comey landed at the end, because it's like, wait, so were you faking this, like, I'm so grateful to be out and I'm just going to be pretending like I'm this drunkard, or like was that, I didn't know where that landed, where was he actually
Yeah.
captive for those 10 years, and his mind has slipped just as they described, and he's trying to live, and maybe he's like really repented in certain ways because now he's got to meet people from waiting. Like at one point in the beginning he says like, we're just elves here. Or is he actually been this like grand manipulator that they kind of placed him in there? Maybe
Hmm.
he wasn't in the prison for that long, maybe he did something wrong, or I don't know, like it just wasn't, because then I'm like, you're saying that Comey got information out to the elves. So what? That means once the information was there, they just locked him up? Or, like, so it's stuff like that that just kind of, there wasn't clarity for me there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like he was overly villainized so that it would misdirect who
Yeah.
had really killed the queens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but then it has me just question, then what was he up to?
Right, right, right. Well, yeah. I mean, my understanding is that he was kidnapped and used as a go-between between the Crescent elves
Yeah.
and the Fae,
Okay.
um, so that the Crescent elves could win against the waning elves, and in doing so would give the Fae some land. And they were holding him hostage, basically. The Fae were holding him hostage to complete
Yes.
this goal. And the queens gave up on it when Ryan, Yirin, and Lettel came to town
Mm-hmm.
because suddenly the blight was gone. I loved that we had another blight. I was just like, oh my gosh, Faes and their blights.
Wouldn't be a Fae if it wasn't a blight.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so even what you're describing though still doesn't make sense for what happened though, because then you also have like, I get all that, and he's considered a prisoner of war, and I feel like that's kind of like a shitty way of going about, like, we're partners, so we're going to actually and like arrest your leader, but okay, like, prisoner of war, you'd expect a little, especially someone that you're working with them, you'd expect like some, hey, have a cottage. But then, like, where's the misdirect? Like, we made this whole thing that he was so shady and so sketchy, because then it was like Lettel goes into the room that he was in, and it was the war room, and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you're like, oh, he's getting info to the elves. Well, the
Mm.
elves were already getting information from
No,
them.
my understanding was it was supposed to be. Yeah,
You see what
I
I
don't.
mean? Like, so then where
Yeah,
was he? Like, what was he up to?
I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know either. So I think it just, like, the times that we finally get these high stakes, these,
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, what's going to happen? It gets a little muddied.
Yeah. The political intrigue was not intriguing
Yeah,
enough, or clear at least.
it felt like everything was kind of walked back every few steps. Like, something would happen, and then things would be immediately kind of walked back on.
Yeah.
Of like, the queen's died, and Little's being blamed for it, but like not really anymore. Or,
Mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm.
all these things are happening. Oh, okay, we're gonna back up, but like, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
not too much. So then
yeah,
it just was a lot of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and
yeah.
it was that kind of pacing throughout.
It does make me curious because the author very clearly had a vision for the end
Yeah,
because of how unfocused Yirin seems in her motivations, that it makes me curious what the author intends for what comes after
yeah.
in whatever follow-up book there is.
This is the first book that I have wanted to that we've covered so far in our series that I've wanted to, like, really see what comes after. I don't know. I mean, I'm too busy. I'm like, we're reading a bunch of other books for our summer series, but I would love to know how it goes and how she progresses as an author,
Yeah.
because
Well,
they're there.
Faebound came out at the start of this year, so there is no second book to go to yet.
Well, crap. Uh, I hope she doesn't listen to this at all. So I don't want to keep harping on this book. Like, there are so many good things to it, and one of those things in particular, which our listeners have said, is our Phobia. Phobia. They're so freaking cute.
I love the idea of mental connections. So we've seen something kind of similar with
Fourth Wing.
Rebecca Yaros's, yes, in Rebecca Yaros's Fourth Wing, which we cover next week.
Mm-hmm.
The dragons and their riders have a mental connection. They talk to each other. I love this idea that the Obia, I mean, I think I do love this idea. The Obia aren't fully like not sentient, but fully cognizant, or not their full selves until they make
Until they
that
make the connection.
connection.
Yeah. It was a good take on it.
Yeah, I thought that was very, very interesting. That, and they don't really have very many memories
Yeah.
of the time before once they've made their connection, whomever they're Faebound to. It was a very, again, unique take compared to what I've read before. So I did find that interesting.
Yeah. Super cute. Love that they're just like they're big old elk, essentially, with like antlers. Kind of imagine them like little hippos mixed with elks. I'm sure there was a real description, but I like my version in
I
my head.
so I liked the idea of the Obias. I could not pin down what they
What they
actually
look
look
like.
like.
Yeah.
Because they have paws,
Yeah, and they have antlers.
and they have antlers, and they have thick coats. I mean, to me, it sounded like a mountain lion with antlers,
Oh.
or like a wolf with antlers. Like I couldn't figure out which one it was supposed to be.
Well, I have no idea how a little baby hippo came into my mind. I was thinking like a pygmy hippo. That's
Okay.
they are very cute. Other than that, I like that, unlike other things that we get, and we'll compare it to Fourth Wing because like you said, we're covering that next week and it's on the mind. But unlike something like Fourth Wing where they come in seasoned, these dragons have their
Hmm.
own distinct personalities. They've been around for hundreds of years, right?
And
These
they have their own government system and
Yeah,
their
yeah.
own rules.
Which is cool too.
Yeah.
But I love that the Obias are so innocent to a
Hmm.
conscious, like to your like
Hmm.
conscious of what you're thinking, that they're willing to say these things that would be like, well, I don't need to look, and this hurt my feelings, like damn, you don't have to point this out.
Yeah, yeah,
But it
yeah.
was a very pure way of going about it and thinking
Yeah.
about it. And I I really liked that idea of this part of your soul connection is
Hmm.
willing to be this honest with you. I I don't I think Urine's example, like the way that she reacted makes sense because she's a very patient person. So
Hmm.
it makes sense that she wasn't like, damn, back off, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Like some people might. Some people being me. And I do think though that I would like to see her mull things over more.
Interesting. To me, I think the innocence of the Obia comes across almost childlike.
Yeah.
And I wonder to what extent the relationship between the Obia and the Fae is almost
Oh.
parental. And so you tolerate things that a child says because they don't really know better.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of how I viewed that relationship.
But it's also like they're so soul connected, like they're just an
Hmm.
extension of yourself, that it was very much like, I don't know, like it felt like there was immediate like, oh, I love you, you're amazing and so sweet, which I'm okay with. But like that's how Ryan was even like in the last
Hmm.
little
Yeah.
epilogue with him, where it's like the second I'm near them I feel better,
Yeah.
versus like when you have something, that is a bit more, because you're right, like sentient is an interesting choice of word there, because they are sentient, but at the same time,
Yeah.
like if you had a creature that was a little bit more pushing or pushback, that was able to say like, hey, what you're saying is weird, let's talk about this.
Yeah. Maybe not sentient's the wrong word.
It's the wrong word, but
Maybe
I get what you're saying and it feels right.
it's more self-aware, right?
Yeah,
They gain an awareness that they didn't have before.
yeah. But like even with it though, like I'm just thinking about it when it comes to like other kind of like bonded creatures, animals, like mythical animals, that characters, because this isn't the first one that's done that,
Mhm.
nor will they be the
Mhm.
last. And I will eat it up every time. But it is done differently, right? And it's just like, okay, this goes back to my high stakes. Here's a character that could be pushing Urine to think about things that she doesn't want to think about. And the
Mhm.
reaction continuously was, you're so sweet. You're
Yeah,
just so
you're so
sweet.
I just love you so
Yeah,
much.
like that was such an innocent question. And
Mhm.
so it felt like that was the relationship with the Fae slash Urine with their Obia, was just such a like, you're so sweet. You can say
Yeah.
anything to me and I won't
Yeah.
think about it critically at all. Versus like, I think you could keep the same element of like the child, like the innocence there, but also the like, all right, well now I'm going to have to mold this over.
Mhm. Mhm. I think there could have been more depth
Yeah.
to the relationships between the Obia and the Fae instead of just granting each other powers,
Yeah.
basically. And instead of instant love, that there would that additional soul connection requires actual soul searching
Yeah.
and wrestling
Yeah.
before the acceptance.
Absolutely. One last thing that I really did like about this book was the sister connection.
Okay, talk to me more about this. I'm
Oh,
curious.
I really enjoyed the love that they had for each other. It did feel, I mean, though, this is someone who doesn't have sisters. I mean, I have Danielle. Sorry, that's not like I have her, but I
Poor
wasn't
Danielle.
raised. I know, poor Danielle, but I wasn't raised with sisters. Like, I didn't have like,
Yeah.
a sister to argue with growing up, and
Mhm.
I it did feel like these are two characters who really love each other and annoy each other, But there is a 9-year difference. So maybe the annoying part doesn't make sense, because maybe it is closer to what my relationship with my sister is, because my sister's 12, 13 years older than me. I can't remember. But like, she's older, so we don't have that bickering relationship because I was a child. She was
Right.
grown, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So I'm almost now confused about this like bickering kind of sisterly relationship they have, because if there is a 9-year relationship, I did love how much they love each other.
Yeah, I mean, for me, their relationship seemed very similar to the relationship my two sisters have, who are very close in age,
Yeah.
right? A
Yep.
lot of bickering, a lot of annoyance with each other often, but at the end of the day, they'll come to each other's
Yeah.
rescue. Whereas, my relationship with my younger sisters is more closer, more true to the age gap.
Yeah.
And I can see, if I compare Lettle to my youngest sister and Urine to myself, I can see some of the same concepts of like abandonment
Mm-hmm.
and like love, but feeling distant
Or you need to
and
look
not
at me as an adult now. I'm not just a
right.
child. Yeah.
Right, right. I do understand those things. But yeah, some there are other elements. It felt confused between two different types of
Of
sisterly
sisters.
relationships.
Yeah. Like, I will stick
But
to, I love how much they love each other. I
yeah,
love that that's the core love of the book, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Uh it did start, the book started out with this core love, right? Like
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
Lettle left everything to go follow her sister.
Yeah,
Urine loves her sister. We get that.
yeah,
At the end of the book, they both chose different.
yeah,
Lettle chose to be with Ryan,
yeah,
and Urine chose the war, as
yeah.
Lettle points out. And you can argue that Lettle could say, like, hey, you don't, I'm choosing Ryan, but also, like, you could choose here too. Like, it's not a
Right,
hard choice to stay
right.
here. And so I can understand why it feels more abandonment again,
Hmm.
but it just is like, for an interesting concept where it starts off with, on some level choosing each other, to at the end not.
Hmm.
I would love to see that explored more, if in the future books at least.
I think that's an excellent point. And to me, I actually think that that's a great reflection of Lettle's growth,
Mm-hmm.
because Lettle chose for herself for the first time
Yeah.
rather than for her sister.
Yep.
Um, so I get the differences, and I actually enjoyed how that journey
Mm-hmm.
resulted for Lettle, at least.
Yeah. I finally appreciate, like, as someone who, when I read a book, the character's like, how am I going to choose? I'm like, choose the hot guy. I don't know. Like, done, did it. I chose. Watch me. Let the world burn. And I finally appreciate that Lettle was like, yeah, no, I'm staying.
Yeah,
That's fine. And I was like, I support that. Like, I just really loved she had a choice. She made
yeah,
it. And we're
yeah,
gonna just let it go, move on. And
yeah.
it was an easy choice. Like, it's the kind of choice that as a reader, I'm always so annoyed of, like, you mean you're going to leave this wonderful place that, yes,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
negatives to it, but, like, be with a hot king.
Yeah, I mean, Lettle chose what benefited her the most. She doesn't have a righteous bone in her body, and good for her.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't feel the need to go save people because she's never been saved herself. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that goes back to our earlier conversation where Lettle as a character is consistent and makes sense.
She doesn't have a righteous bone in her body.
I meant like righteous, like fury, not as in righteous as in faithful.
I know, it just cracks me up. Like, your descriptions of characters crack me up. Of,
Yeah,
like,
I'm
the
sorry.
harshness where it's like, oh damn, sound like an Obi over here. Just trying. I also feel like Lettle. I'm like, I'm a Lettle apologist. I feel like Lettle knew her like, where her faults were. Like,
Yeah,
she knew when she was jealous of not getting an Obia. She knew when she was jealous, like with Ryan talking to the other soldier. She
yeah,
knew when she was like acting out. Like, she was so aware of like her faults,
yeah,
and I appreciated it when she was like, I'm gonna lean into it. And then the clear moments of, fine, I'll grow.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
try. Like, it was like, I think it's that kind of self-awareness that I I like to pretend I am, where it's like, I'm making a bad choice and I'm going to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get it. Like, I think with some distance, I can appreciate that. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
in the moment it was hard,
It is, yeah.
but maybe I would feel different going back and rereading.
I'm also like a person who's just the absolute like I need to tell someone something. So it's like if I had like this cryptic prophecy that like the person I'm with is going to die, like I'm much more of like, can we just I'm going to tell you and we're going to figure this out.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's have me not kill you.
yeah,
Let's This is what I
yeah,
would love for us. For me
yeah,
not to kill you. Help me not
yeah,
kill you.
yep. Sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. And then every time we fight, I just be like, hey, remember that prophecy?
Don't tempt me.
Don't tempt me. I will make that prophecy true. Yeah. So, I mean, I have hope for future books. There's talent there. Like
Yeah.
she has a very wonderful creative mind, and I am very excited to see her progression as an author.
Yeah, I think, by the time the second book comes out, I'll probably read it because I
Yeah.
do find this world interesting and I do want to go back to it. So I think that there is opportunity for growth,
Yeah.
and I don't doubt that Saara has another series as well. So I
Mhm.
don't doubt that she'll continue to grow as an author.
Yeah.
And I I am interested to see where she goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be discussing Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. If you would like to submit your take on any of the books we plan to discuss later this summer, please be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we ask for listener submissions.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle BookTalk for Book Talk. Bye.
Bye.